Why is it that, mathematically speaking, holding $200,000 in your investment portfolio means you are effectively halfway to becoming a millionaire in terms of time, even though you only possess 20% of the cash? It sounds like a riddle, or perhaps a lie sold to you by overly optimistic financial gurus. But it is actually a fundamental law of financial physics that the human brain, which is wired for linear progression, struggles to comprehend. You see, the journey from $0 to $100,000 is a grueling, mud-sucking slog through hell that breaks 95% of people. But the journey from $100,000 to $200,000, 000, is where the laws of gravity begin to shift in your favor. My name is King, and today I am going to break down why $200,000 is the specific tipping point where you stop pushing the boulder and start chasing it, and why everything, your psychology, your career, and your math, fundamentally changes the moment you cross this six-figure threshold. To truly understand the profound significance of hitting $200,000, we first have to revisit the brutal reality of the first $100,000, a concept famously described by Charlie Munger as simply a bitch. There is no polite way to say it because there is no polite way to experience it. When you are starting from zero, you are fighting against static friction. In physics, static friction is the force that keeps an object at rest. It takes significantly more energy to get a heavy object moving than it does to keep it moving. In your financial life, this static friction is the combination of your cost of living, inflation, and the lack of any meaningful investment returns. When you have $5,000 invested, a 10% market return gives you $500. That is a nice dinner, but it doesn't change your life. It doesn't pay your rent. It doesn't even cover the inflation on your grocery bill. You are doing 99% of the heavy lifting with your labor. You are trading your time, your sweat, and your sanity for every single dollar that goes into that account. This is why the first $100,000 takes typically 7 to 8 years for a disciplined saver to accumulate. It is a long, dark tunnel where you are saving money, but seeing almost no acceleration. You feel like you are running on a treadmill that is turned off. You are sweating, but you aren't going anywhere fast. This is the atmospheric phase of wealth building, where the gravity of being poor is pulling you down with maximum force. Most people look at the math during this phase and quit because the effort to reward ratio seems broken. They save $500 a month for a year, have $6,000, and the market drops, leaving them with $5,500. It feels like a scam, but they fail to see that they are building the foundation of a skyscraper that hasn't broken ground yet. They are burning 90% of their rocket fuel just to lift 1 inch off the launch pad. But then you hit $100,000 and something shifts. And then you hit $200,000 and the world flips upside down. Let's look at the raw data, the physics of the timeline, to prove why $200,000 is the halfway point. If we assume you are saving $10,000 a year and achieving an 8% return, getting to that first $100,000 takes roughly 7.8 years. But watch what happens next. To go from $100,000 to $200,000 with that same savings rate takes only about 5.1 years. You have just shaved almost 3 years off your sentence. Why? Because now your money is contributing almost as much to the pot as you are. And to go from $200,000 to $300,000, that takes only 3.7 years. Do you see the collapse of time? The gap between the milestones is shrinking. When you stand at the $200,000 mark, you have survived the longest, hardest duration of the journey. You have effectively crossed the time barrier. Even though $200,000 is only 1/5 of $1 million in terms of the years required to get there, you have endured half of the suffering. You have passed the point of maximum resistance. This is not just encouraging, it is a mathematical fact derived from the rule of 72 and the nature of exponential curves. The curve is flat for a long time, and then it goes vertical. $200,000 is the elbow of that curve. It is the moment the plane lifts its nose off the runway. You aren't at altitude yet, but you are no longer driving a car on the ground. You are dealing with aerodynamics. The drag coefficient on your life has been drastically reduced. This realization is crucial because it changes your entire strategy from survival to management. At $200,000, you have also achieved something that I like to call the minimum wage milestone. And this is where the abstract numbers on a screen translate into a visceral reality. If you have $200,000 invested in a broad market index fund, yielding a historical average of 7% to 9%, that portfolio is generating roughly $14,000 to $18,000 per year on average. Now, I want you to visualize something very specific. That amount of money is roughly equivalent to the take-home pay of a minimum wage employee working part-time to full-time, depending on where you live. When you hit $200,000, you have effectively hired your first permanent employee. This isn't a human employee who calls in sick, steals Post-it notes, or complains about the coffee. This is a capital employee. It works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It never sleeps, it never eats, and it never asks for a raise. Think about the implications of this. That $14,000 to $18,000 a year covers your grocery bill forever, or it covers your utilities and your car insurance forever, or it covers a massive chunk of your rent. You have effectively removed an entire category of survival stress from your life. Before $200,000, you were solely responsible for keeping the lights on. Every electron flowing through your house was paid for by your sweat. After $200,000, your capital employee pays the electric bill. This creates a level of psychological bandwidth that you simply cannot access when you are broke. It frees up your brain to stop thinking about survival and start thinking about expansion. Furthermore, this capital employee acts as an inflation shield. One of the silent killers of the working class is that their wages rarely keep up with the true cost of living. If inflation is 5% and your raise is 3%, you are becoming poorer every single year. But assets tend to inflate with the currency. When the price of groceries goes up, the companies selling the groceries make more revenue, and their stock prices generally rise. By owning the assets, the S&P 500, you are on the side of the business owners, not just the consumers. At $200,000, a 5% inflation spike is annoying, but your portfolio likely grew by 8 to 10%, meaning your purchasing power is preserved. You have built a moat around your financial castle. You are no longer naked in the economic winter, you have a shelter. This brings us to the profound psychological shift that occurs at this level, the death of desperation. The human brain operates very differently when it is under financial threat versus when it is secure. When you have $0 or $10,000, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, is hyperactive. You are scanning for threats. A flat tire isn't just an inconvenience, it's a crisis. A weird look from your boss isn't just awkward, it's a potential eviction notice. You operate from a place of scarcity and compliance. You say yes to unreasonable deadlines because you are terrified of the consequences of saying no. You tolerate toxic behavior, low pay, and disrespect because you are mathematically cornered. But at $200,000, that fear center quiets down. You develop a concrete buffer. You know logically and emotionally that if you lost your job tomorrow, you wouldn't starve. You could survive for 4, 5, or even 6 years on that capital if you cut your expenses to the bone. This knowledge changes your posture. It changes the tone of your voice in meetings. It creates a quiet arrogance that is incredibly attractive to the marketplace. Paradoxically, employers smell desperation. They can sense when an employee is trapped, and they exploit it. But they can also sense when an employee has options. When you walk into a negotiation with $200,000 backing you up, you are not asking for a raise. You are proposing a trade of value. If they say no, you are fine. This lack of neediness often leads to faster promotions and better opportunities because you are operating from your prefrontal cortex, the strategic, logical part of your brain rather than your reptile brain. Consider the yes man phenomenon. In every corporate office, there are people who agree with everything the boss says, even when the boss is about to drive the company off a cliff. They do this because they are protecting their paycheck. But the person with $200,000 can afford to be the strategic advisor. They can say, I think this is a bad idea, and here is why. They can take the risk of being wrong because the penalty for being fired is no longer fatal. This makes them infinitely more valuable to the company. You stop being a cog and start being a consultant, even if your job title hasn't changed. The $200,000 doesn't just buy you stuff, it buys you the audacity of autonomy. It buys you the ability to sleep at night when there are rumors of layoffs. While your coworkers are panic updating their resumes and hyperventilating in the break room, you are calmly doing your work, knowing that even in the worst case scenario, you have a multi-year runway to figure things out. That peace of mind is the ultimate performance enhancer. However, I must issue a severe warning here because the $200,000 mark is also home to one of the most dangerous traps in the entire wealth building life cycle. I call it the intermediate valley of death, or the fake rich plateau. This is where more potential millionaires go to die than anywhere else. Here is the scenario. You have spent 5 to 7 years grinding. You have sacrificed. You have driven the beater car. You have packed your lunch. And now you see $200,000 on your screen. You feel rich. For the first time, you have enough liquid capital to walk into a dealership and buy a brand new Mercedes or BMW in cash, or put a massive down payment on a house that is way too big for you. The temptation to look wealthy suddenly becomes overwhelming because you feel like you have earned it. You tell yourself, I have $200,000, spending $50,000 on a car is fine, I still have $150,000 left. This is a fatal mathematical error. If you succumb to this temptation, you are not just spending $50,000. You are decapitating your compound interest curve right at the moment it was about to go vertical. Let's do the math on that $50,000 car. If you leave that $50,000 invested at 8% for the next 30 years, it grows to over $500,000. So that German sedan didn't cost you $50,000, it cost your future self $500,000. It cost you 3 to 4 years of freedom. You are trading years of your life for heated seats and a badge on a grill to impress people at traffic lights who do not care about you. This is often driven by the Diderot effect, a social phenomenon where buying one new possession leads to a spiral of consumption. You buy the new car, which makes your clothes look old, so you buy new suits. Then your watch looks cheap, so you buy a Rolex. Then your apartment looks shabby compared to your car and watch, so you upgrade your rent. Suddenly, your $200,000 is gone, and you are back to living paycheck to paycheck, only now you have higher monthly maintenance costs. You have voluntarily put the chains back on your wrists. The $200,000 milestone is a test of character. It tests whether you are building wealth for freedom or building wealth for status. If you start looting your own castle to buy decorations before the walls are finished, you will remain a peasant forever. The rule at $200,000 is absolute. Do not touch the principal. You must treat that money as if it is locked in a vault that you lost the key to. You are cash poor, but asset rich. You must continue to live like you are broke. You must continue to drive the old car. You must continue to pack your lunch, because if you interrupt the compounding now, you reset the clock. You slide back down the hill that you just spent 7 years climbing. The danger is that at $200,000, you have enough money to make a mistake that you cannot easily recover from. At $10,000, a mistake is a cheap lesson. At $200,000, a mistake is a decade of lost time. There is also a social isolation that happens at this stage. You are in the boring middle. You are too rich to relate to your broke friends who are complaining about being unable to afford pizza, but you are not rich enough to hang out with the multimillionaires at the country club. You are in financial purgatory. It is lonely. You look at your account and it's doing great, but your lifestyle hasn't changed. You are still in the same apartment, driving the same car. The novelty of seeing the numbers go up has worn off. This leads to boredom, and boredom is the investor's worst enemy. When you are bored, you want to tinker. You start thinking, maybe I should put 20% into this new crypto coin, or maybe I can time the market. You want excitement. But you must understand that good investing is supposed to be boring. It should be like watching paint dry or watching grass grow. If you want excitement, go to a casino or take up skydiving with a discount parachute. Do not use your financial freedom fund for entertainment. The ability to endure boredom is the superpower of the wealthy. The poor demand immediate stimulation. The rich demand long-term results. So, how do we navigate this phase? What is the strategy once you break the $200,000 ceiling? The strategy shifts from aggressive saving to intelligent allocation. When you had $5,000, a 1% fee on your mutual fund didn't matter, it was $50. But on $200,000, a 1% fee is $2,000 a year. That is $2,000 that is not compounding for you. That is a vacation you are gifting to a bank manager every single year for doing absolutely nothing. At this stage, you must become ruthless about expense ratios. You need to be in low-cost index funds or ETFs with expense ratios of 0.03% or lower. You need to start thinking about asset location, which assets go in your tax advantage accounts like 401ks or IRAs, and which go in your taxable brokerage accounts. You need to start thinking about tax drag. You are no longer just a saver, you are a capital allocator. You are the CEO of your own holding company, and your job is to minimize friction. This is also the time to double down on skill stacking. Since your money is now doing some of the heavy lifting, you can use your mental energy to increase your primary income. The goal is to pour fuel on the fire. If you can keep your lifestyle costs fixed at the level they were when you had $50,000, but you increase your income and your portfolio is generating returns, you will experience the velocity effect. You will tear through the $300,000 and $400,000 milestones at a speed that will shock you. You will look at your spreadsheet and think there is a glitch because the numbers are growing faster than your contributions. This is the flywheel effect kicking in. The first push of the flywheel took all your strength. The second push was hard. But now the flywheel is spinning. It has its own momentum. Your job is just to tap it occasionally to keep it speeding up. And importantly, not to stick a stick in the spokes by buying stupid consumer garbage. You must also prepare for the volatility. When you have $10,000 and the market drops 20%, you lose $2,000. It sucks, but you can earn that back in a month. When you have $200,000 and the market drops 20%, you lose $40,000. That is an entire year's salary for many people, vaporized in a few weeks. This is the gut check. This is where you find out if you are truly an investor or just a gambler on a winning streak. You have to detach your emotions from the number. You have to realize that you haven't lost anything unless you sell. You still own the same number of shares. The market is simply offering a lower price for them today. In fact, if you are still in the accumulation phase, a market crash is a gift. It means your new contributions are buying more shares on sale. You need to reframe the red days as discount days. If you panic at $200,000, you will never reach $1 million. You need to develop the stomach for the turbulence. The reason wealthy people seem calm during recessions is not just because they have money. It is because they understand the physics of market cycles. They know that gravity pulls things down, but the escape velocity of innovation pushes things up over time. They don't fight the gravity, they use it to slingshot themselves forward. As you approach the end of this $200,000 phase, you need to understand that you are standing on the runway. You have done the pre-flight checks, the engines are spooled up, you are moving down the tarmac, you haven't taken off yet, you aren't flying, but you have enough speed that stopping is no longer an option. You are committed. The destination is inevitable as long as you don't crash the plane on purpose. And looking back, you will realize that the version of you that existed at $0 was a completely different person. That person was driven by fear and necessity. The version of you at $200,000 is driven by strategy and vision. You have proven to yourself that you can delay gratification. You have proven that you can control your impulses. You have mastered the boring, unsexy art of consistency. And that is why $200,000 is the halfway point. Not because of the money, but because of the person you had to become to get there. The skills you built to get the first $200,000 are the exact same skills that will get you to $1 million, only now you have the wind at your back. But remember, $200,000 is just the ignition. It's the moment the car starts moving without you pushing it. But if you want to know what it feels like to truly fly, to reach the point where your investment income doesn't just pay for your groceries, but actually replaces your entire 9-to-5 salary and grants you total autonomy, then you are looking for the next number. The number where the magic fundamentally changes from helpful to liberating. That number is $500,000. If you want to see the roadmap for that next stage and understand the quiet replacement that happens $500,000, you need to click this video right here. How $500K invested quietly replaces your 9-to-5 income. It is the blueprint for your next chapter. I'm King, and I'll see you there.